The rain had turned the roads to mud by the time Dr. Eleanor Voss's rental car lurched into Black Hollow. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, smearing the dying light into watery streaks. Through the glass, the town emerged, like a half-remembered nightmare. Clapboard houses hunched under the weight of centuries, their paint peeling like sunburnt skin. A rusted sign announced, Black Hollow, founded 1689, the letters bleeding rust down weathered wood. Eleanor killed the engine and stepped into the storm. Her boots sank into the mud with a wet gasp. The air smelled of salt and something older, something buried. The sheriff was waiting for her under the awning of the general store, his badge dull against his rain-spattered jacket. "You the bone expert?" he asked, not offering his name. "Forensic archaeologist," Eleanor corrected, pushing her damp hair from her face. "Where are the remains?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked past her, toward the tree line where the mist curled like grasping fingers. "Church basement," he said finally. "But you ought to know. Folks here don't like folks digging up the past." A shadow moved in the upstairs window of the store. An old woman stared down, her face pressed to the glass like a prisoner. Eleanor hefted her bag higher on her shoulder. "I'm not here to make friends," the sheriff spat into the mud. "Ain't about friends, doctor. It's about what sleeps." Behind them, the church steeple speared the bruised sky. Something glinted in its boarded-up attic window, a flash of pale, watching. Then it was gone. The first bone, when she found it hours later in the flickering glow of her work lamp, was small. Too small. A child's finger. And clutched in its tiny skeletal grasp, a scrap of fabric. Modern. The tires of Eleanor's rental car crunched over broken oyster shells as she pulled up to the Black Hollow Inn, a sagging Victorian with a flickering vacancy sign that buzzed like a dying insect. The porch groaned under her weight as she approached the front desk, where a gaunt man with yellowed fingernails tapped a ledger book with a chewed pencil. "Voss," she said, sliding her ID across the sticky varnish. "Reservation for one." The innkeeper's eyes lingered too long on her left hand, noting the absence of a ring. "Just you, then?" His breath smelled of pickled eggs and stale tobacco. "Just me." He smirked, revealing a gold-capped canine. "Ain't safe for women alone here after dark." Eleanor held his gaze until he looked away. Room 7 smelled of mildew and lye soap. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing water stains shaped like screaming faces. Eleanor dumped her bag on the quilt, a patchwork of faded blues that reminded her of a child's nursery. Her phone buzzed. A text from the university. "Did you make contact with the local historian? Hargrove?" Before she could reply, the floorboards creaked outside her door. Not footsteps, more like the sound of someone leaning against the wood. Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over the deadbolt. A whisper. "They'll blame you when the bones start walking." She yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. But on the carpet, a single tiny handprint in damp earth. The basement of Black Hollow Baptist Church smelled of wet limestone and something older. A metallic tang that clung to the back of Eleanor's throat like the aftertaste of a bad dream. Her work lamp cast a jaundiced glow over the excavation grid, where the skeletal remains of a child curled in the dirt like a question mark. Sheriff Cooper hovered near the stairs, his flashlight beam darting across the walls as if expecting the shadows to lunge. "You done yet?" he asked for the third time in an hour. Eleanor ignored him, her gloved fingers brushing dirt from the child's phalanges. The bones were too small, too delicate. A girl, maybe 6 or 7. Then she saw it, wedged between the metacarpals, a shred of fabric, neon pink, and impossibly fresh. Her breath hitched. Impossible. The sheriff must have heard her stillness. What? Eleanor didn't answer. She reached for her field kit, her hands steady despite the electric dread crawling up her spine. The UV light clicked on, painting the fabric in lurid violet. A manufacturer's tag fluoresced back at her. Hanes, 2022. Her head snapped up. These remains were uncovered yesterday? Yeah, Cooper said, shifting his weight. Bunch of high schoolers doing a penance project knocked over the old baptismal font. Found the bones under the foundation. Eleanor's thumb grazed the fabric again. The fibers were pristine, no decay, no weathering, as if it had been buried yesterday. But the bone it clung to was centuries old. A drop of sweat slid down her temple. Somewhere above them, the church's pipes groaned like a dying animal. Cooper's radio crackled to life. Dale, you gotta get over to the Miller place. Their boy's gone. The sheriff's face went slack. Gone? Yeah, vanished. And Dale... Static swallowed the dispatcher's voice for a heartbeat. Mrs. Miller says she saw him holding hands with someone in the woods. Eleanor's gaze dropped back to the tiny skeleton, to the modern fabric in its grasp. A terrible understanding uncoiled in her gut. The children taken now, they weren't the first, and if the past was any indication, they wouldn't be the last. The basement air clung to Eleanor's skin like the damp breath of an open grave. Her work lamp flickered as she knelt beside the skeletal remains, its yellow light catching the glint of something that shouldn't be there. The tiny metacarpal bones curled inward, not in the relaxed posture of burial, but in a rigor mortis clutch around a scrap of fabric so violently pink it looked radioactive against the ancient dirt. Sheriff Cooper's flashlight beam jerked across the walls like a startled animal. Christ, he muttered as a water droplet hit his collar. Place is sweating. Eleanor didn't look up. Her nitrile gloves whispered against bone as she turned the fragment. The material was cheap polyester, the kind sold in Walmart multi-packs. Fresh enough that when she rubbed it between her fingers, she half expected to find it still warm. These remains were sealed under the foundation? Her voice sounded alien in the crypt-like space. Since at least 1903. Cooper's boot scuffed the dirt. Church records show they laid this floor over the original dirt basement. Ain't nobody been down here till those damn kids broke through last week. The UV light's click echoed off the walls. Under its glow, the fabric tag burned electric blue. LOT number 1122-09. A production batch from last fall. A cold knot formed in Eleanor's stomach. She'd seen this particular shade of pink before, in the missing persons file she'd reviewed at the county seat. Jessica Pearson, age 8, vanished September 18th, wearing a Hello Kitty hoodie in this exact fluorescent hue. The sweatshirt had been found 3 days later in Black Hollow Woods, sliced to ribbons but completely bloodless. The church's foundation stones groaned above them. Something scuttled in the crawl space, too large for rats. Cooper's radio erupted with static. Dale, you need to... The dispatcher's voice cut out, then returned shrill. Miller kid's gone. His mom's saying he walked right into the goddamn... The sheriff's hand shook as he keyed the mic. Say again, Darlene? Eleanor barely heard the response. Her attention was locked on the skeletal hand's index finger, fractured in 3 places. Defense wounds. This child had fought back. A wet crunch came from the darkness beyond their light, then another. The rhythmic sound of small bare feet pressing into damp earth. Cooper's flashlight died with a whimper. In the sudden blackness, something giggled. The air in the Black Hollow archives was thick with the scent of decaying paper and wood polish. Eleanor sat at a splintered oak table, the only light coming from a flickering fluorescent tube that buzzed like a trapped wasp. Before her lay the remnants of Reverend Josiah Whitlock's personal journals, leather-bound tomes warped by time, their pages brittle as dried skin. She turned a yellowed leaf carefully, her gloves catching on a dark stain that might have been ink or blood. October 17th, 1693. The children have begun to wander again. Abigail Cuthbert saw her Daniel standing at the edge of the wood last eve, though we buried him neat in the churchyard these 3 weeks past. His mouth moved as if to speak, but no sound came forth save the buzzing of flies. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She flipped ahead, the spine cracking in protest. November 1st, 1693. The bargain is broken. What we sent into the dark has come back hungry. They gather at the standing stones when the moon is right, their bellies swollen, though they neither eat nor drink. Tonight we shall... The rest of the entry had been scored out with furious slashes of ink. A floorboard creaked behind her. Eleanor spun, expecting the sour-faced librarian. Instead, she found old Miss Clay looming in the doorway, her gnarled fingers clutching a rusted key. "You found it, then," the old woman croaked. "The good Reverend's confession." Eleanor gestured to the ruined page. "What happened here? What did they do to the children?" Miss Clay's milky eyes gleamed. "Not what they did, girl. What they didn't do." She shuffled forward, her orthopedic shoes scraping across the floorboards. "The ones we sent away came back changed. So the survivors built walls, dug graves, filled mouths with salt and prayers." A gnarled finger tapped the journal. "But the hungry don't stay buried." Outside, the wind howled through the churchyard. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter rang out, clear as a bell and utterly alone. Eleanor looked down. A fresh line of muddy footprints led from the archive's door to just behind her chair. Small, barefoot, and vanishing even as she watched. The Black Hollow Historical Society smelled of mothballs and forgotten sins. Eleanor's fingers hovered over Reverend Whitlock's journal, its cracked leather binding whispering against the wooden table as she opened it. The first page bore a warning in faded brown ink. "Let no eyes but those of godly men behold these words, lest the seeing invite the seen." She turned the page. The paper crumbled at the edges like burnt skin. October the 12th. The children grow thin as shadows. Tonight, Ezekiel Poole claimed the standing stones bled when the moon touched them. The boy is not given to fancy. I fear what moves among us now wears truth's face. A rust-colored fingerprint smeared the margin. Eleanor's UV light revealed 3 more words, hastily scrawled and later scratched out. They are watching. Between November 3rd and 9th, someone had razor-bladed out entire sections. Only gutted sentences remained. Sacrifice not accepted. The hollow ones walk. Teeth too sharp. A single loose page slid from the binding. Eleanor's breath caught. December 24th, blessed Christmas morn. The returned children gathered at the meeting house windows last night. Their eyes reflect no light. Sarah Hobbs let hers in. We found her at dawn, her mouth stuffed with... The rest dissolved into an ink blot shaped disturbingly, like a small handprint. Miss Clay's gnarled finger stabbed down on the page. That's when they built the new church over the old foundation. Sealed the basement with... Her rheumy eyes darted to the ceiling. With what wouldn't stay buried. A cold draft snuffed the candle between them. The old woman didn't seem to notice. Your forensic machines won't tell you this, she whispered. but dig deeper in that grave of yours. You'll find... A child's voice echoed from the stacks. Grandmother? Miss Clay went corpse pale. Her false teeth clicked as her jaw trembled. Too early, she muttered. Harvest moon's not yet full. Eleanor's flashlight beam caught what the candlelight had hidden. A glass display case against the far wall. Inside, mounted on velvet, sat a row of iron keys labeled Church Basement, 1693 to 1903. Beneath them, a newer placard. Last used November 12, 2013. Do not remove. The same date as the last disappearance cycle. As Eleanor reached for the case, the journal slammed shut on its own. A fresh line of text oozed across the cover in something dark and wet. Let them in. Outside, the wind carried the sound of a skipping rope slapping pavement in perfect rhythm. Slap, slap, slap. But no feet touched the ground. The Miller house stood at the end of a dirt road, its porch light flickering like a dying heartbeat. Eleanor pulled up behind Sheriff Cooper's cruiser, the gravel crunching like broken teeth under her tires. The front door hung open, revealing a slice of chaos inside. Overturned furniture, a shattered lamp, and the sour tang of fear thick in the air. Mrs. Miller sat on the couch, her face a mask of smeared mascara and shock. She clutched a stuffed rabbit to her chest, its fur matted with something dark. He was just here, she whispered. Right here, watching cartoons. Cooper knelt beside her, his voice low. Tell me again what you saw, Marjorie. The woman's fingers dug into the toy. I turned my back for 1 minute, and then I heard giggling. Her breath hitched. From the backyard. Eleanor moved to the window. The backyard was a tangle of overgrown grass leading straight to the tree line. A child's sneaker lay abandoned in the dirt. And then, Cooper pressed. Marjorie's voice dropped to a whisper. I saw him, my Benji, standing at the edge of the woods, but he wasn't alone. A cold finger traced Eleanor's spine. There were others, Marjorie continued, little shapes in the trees. They were holding hands, and Benji, he reached out, like he knew them. Eleanor's gaze caught on something outside, a flash of movement between the pines. Small, pale, watching, then gone. Cooper's radio crackled. Dale, we got a problem. The church alarm's going off. Eleanor's stomach dropped. The bones, the journal, the keys, and now the missing boy. It was happening again. The Miller's microwave clock blinked 3:47 a.m. in toxic green numbers when Eleanor's boot crunched on something in the backyard. She lifted her foot to find Benji's inhaler, the plastic casing cracked like an eggshell. The medicine inside had leaked out, forming a sticky puddle that reflected the flashlight beam like a black mirror. Sheriff Cooper's voice carried through the night. K9 units coming up empty. It's like the boy vanished mid-step. His flashlight beam cut across the tree line, illuminating dozens of small footprints in the mud, all leading into the woods, none coming out. Then Eleanor saw it. The grass at the forest's edge stood perfectly still, while the rest of the field swayed in the wind, as if something had sucked all the air out of a 6-foot-wide circle. In its center lay Benji's other sneaker, the laces tied in an elaborate knot no 8-year-old could manage. They teach them that. Miss Clay materialized from the shadows, her house dress flapping like a funeral shroud. She pointed a knobby finger at the shoe. The knot's the same as in 93, and 03, and... A scream cut her off, from the woods, high-pitched, human, but not quite. The search party froze as the sound morphed into laughter, the kind that starts in a child's belly but ends in something much older. The trees shook, though there was no wind, their leaves hissing like radio static. Eleanor's flashlight died. In the sudden dark, wet smacking sounds emerged from the impossible stillness, the sound of small mouths chewing. Cooper's service revolver clicked as he cocked the hammer. "Benji! You out there, son?" Silence. Then, from 3 feet away, a whisper. "I'm right here, Sheriff." Cooper spun, flashlight blazing, illuminating empty air where the voice had been. But the grass was trampled now, in a perfect circle around them, as if they'd been surrounded by unseen watchers. Marjorie Miller's wail shattered the night from back at the house. Eleanor sprinted to find the woman clawing at her own kitchen window, where tiny handprints had appeared on the inside of the glass. The stuffed rabbit she'd been clutching now sat on the counter, its head twisted 180 degrees to face backward. Its button eyes were gone. In their place, 2 blackened molars pushed into the fabric. The church bells began ringing without human hands. The Black Hollow Tavern smelled of stale beer and generations of lies. Eleanor pushed through the saloon doors into a wall of silence, every head swiveling toward her, every conversation dying mid-sentence. The bartender's rag froze on a half-polished glass. Sheriff Cooper sat at a corner booth with 3 men whose faces looked carved from the same gnarled wood as the pews in the cursed church. They didn't stand when she approached. "You're not welcome here, Doctor," said the one with a faded Marine's tattoo, Hargrove, the mayor. His knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. Eleanor dropped Benji's backward-headed rabbit on the table. It landed with a soft thud, its tooth-filled eye socket staring up at them. "Talk." The men exchanged glances. The oldest, a gaunt man with a silver crucifix at his throat, made the sign of the cross. Miss Clay's laughter crackled from the shadowed back booth. "Told you she'd figure it out." The old woman nursed a tumbler of something that smelled like turpentine. "Come sit with me, girl. I'll tell you what these cowards won't." The tavern's sole light bulb flickered as Eleanor slid into the sticky vinyl booth. Miss Clay's breath reeked of decay when she leaned in. "Every 30 years, she whispered, "the Hollow gets hungry." Her yellowed fingernail traced the water rings on the table. First in 1693, then 1793, 1893, 1993. A grim smile. "You do the math." Outside, the church bell tolled once. No one touched their drinks. "The children taken aren't gone," Miss Clay continued. "They're changing, learning, waiting." She tapped the rabbit's teeth. "These came from my nephew, Tommy. Went missing in 93. They found these molars in his pillowcase 2 weeks later." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "After we'd buried him." A crash came from the kitchen. The bartender cursed, then went very quiet. Too quiet. The Marine's vet finally spoke. "There's a reason we don't have a playground in this town." Eleanor's phone buzzed, a forensic alert. The DNA from the molars matched no database records, but the enamel analysis confirmed one thing. The teeth were over 300 years old. The Black Hollow Tavern's screen door whined like a dying animal as Eleanor entered. 12 pairs of eyes locked onto her, 12 pairs that quickly dropped to study whiskey glasses or grease-stained placemats. The jukebox in the corner scratched out a Patsy Cline record. The needle stuck in an endless loop on the line, "I go out walkin'." Sheriff Cooper sat at the founder's table, the one with 1689 carved into its oak surface. The men surrounding him weren't drinking. They were fortifying. Hargrove, the mayor, didn't bother looking up from his ledger. "We don't serve outsiders after sundown, Doctor." Voss, his fountain pen scratched across a tax document like a scalpel. "Town ordinance." Eleanor slammed the defiled rabbit onto the table. Its inverted head lolled grotesquely, those tooth-filled eye sockets staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above. The silver crucifix around old man Pritchett's neck swung violently without touching. "Christ almighty," he whispered, making the sign of the cross over his Budweiser. Miss Clay's cackle cut through the tension from her shadowy corner booth. "Took you long enough to bring it to them." Her gnarled fingers drummed a rhythm that matched the skipping record. Tap, 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 tap. "But you're asking the wrong questions to the wrong men." The Marine vet, the one they called Sergeant, though he'd never served, finally spoke. "There's a reason we burned the elementary school in '93. His Zippo flared, illuminating the puckered scar where his left pinky should have been. "Better know school than—" His eyes flicked to the rabbit. "That." A wet thud came from the kitchen. The bartender didn't move to check it. The deep fryer kicked on by itself, the oil bubbling violently, though no food had been lowered in. Miss Clay slid a photograph across the sticky table. A black and white image of 12 children standing before the stone circle, their faces blurred as if they'd turned during the exposure. The date scrawled on back, October 31st, 1893. "Every 100 years," the old woman whispered, her breath reeking of grave dirt and peppermint schnapps. "The standing stones open, and what we buried comes home hungry." Her fingernail, black with fungus, tapped the photo's edge. "Your bones are down there with them now, girl. They're learning your shape." The emergency alert tore through Black Hollow like a gunshot. Amber alert. 12-year-old female, last seen wearing pink hoodie. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she sped toward the outskirts of town, where the woods swallowed the road whole. The radio dispatcher's voice crackled through her dashboard speakers. Suspect described as a child, possibly multiple children. Witnesses report hearing, singing. Then static. The gas station. The fluorescent lights of the quick stop buzzed like angry wasps, casting a sickly glow over the crime scene. Deputy Ruiz stood over a spilled Slurpee, its cherry red syrup pooling around a single white sneaker. "She was here," he muttered, "buying Skittles." Then the security cameras glitched. Eleanor studied the monitor. The footage showed a girl in a pink hoodie, Jessica Pearson's younger sister Mia, handing cash to the clerk. Then, at exactly 9:13 p.m., the screen filled with noise. When it cleared, Mia was gone. Only her shoe remained, and something else, a child's handprint pressed into the counter. Too small to be Mia's, too old to be fresh. The print's ridges were worn smooth, as if eroded by time. The cashier, a pockmarked teen named Dylan, rocked back and forth behind the register. "They came in with her," he whispered. "Just stood by the coolers, not buying anything, not breathing." His fingernails dug into his palms. Then one looked at me. Its eyes were black. All black. Eleanor's stomach turned. "How many?" Dylan's voice broke. "Enough to fill the aisles." Outside, the wind carried a distant, off-key rendition of Ring Around the Rosie. Eleanor rewound the footage. At 9:12 p.m., Mia smiled at something just off camera. Her lips moved. "You came back." Then, in the reflection of the snack machine's glass, a dozen small figures, their faces blurred like the 1893 photograph, their hands outstretched, waiting. The trail led to the edge of Black Hollow Woods, where the trees grew too close together, their branches woven like bony fingers. Mia's hoodie hung from a low limb, the sleeves tied in that same intricate knot. Inside the pocket, a baby tooth, and a note in childish scrawl, "We missed you." The Quick Stop's neon sign buzzed like a dying insect, casting a feverish glow across the gasoline-slick pavement. Eleanor stepped over a shattered Slurpee cup, its red syrup pooling around Mia Pearson's abandoned sneaker, the laces tied in that same impossible knot from the Miller boys' disappearance. The air smelled of copper and burnt sugar. Deputy Ruiz's flashlight beam trembled as it illuminated the security monitor. "Watch the timestamp," he muttered. The grainy footage showed Mia counting out exact change for her Skittles at 9:12:47 p.m. At 9:12:48, the camera's date stamp flickered. Then the screen filled with static snow. When the image resolved at 9:13:1, Mia was gone. But something else had appeared. A single frame glitch showing the snack machine's reflection. Eleanor froze the image. There, in the warped glass, stood 12 blurred figures in outdated clothing. Their outstretched hands pressed against the reflection's surface like prisoners against glass. One girl's face came clearest, her hollow cheeks framing a smile with too many teeth. The name Abigail flashed through Eleanor's mind, though she couldn't say why. The cashier, Dylan, had curled into the fetal position behind the counter. His nails had scratched bloody furrows down his own arms. "They were singing," he whispered. "Not with their mouths, with their—" He tapped his throat where the vocal cords would be. Inside out. Outside, the wind carried a dissonant choir of children's voices singing, "Ashes, ashes." The last word wasn't, "We all fall down." It was, "We all come home." Eleanor's UV light revealed what the naked eye couldn't see. Dozens of tiny handprints glowing faintly on the linoleum. They led in a perfect spiral to the walk-in freezer. The metal door groaned when she touched it, its surface ice-cold despite the broken refrigeration unit. Inside, the walls were covered in frost-etched drawings, stick figures holding hands around a stone circle. Beneath them, written in what forensic analysis would later confirm was 17th century English dialect. "The hungry ones walk when the moon bleeds." And then Eleanor saw it. The security footage was still playing on loop. In every third cycle, just before the static hit, Mia's lips moved again. Not, "You came back." "You're coming back," as if she wasn't talking to the figures in the reflection, but to Eleanor. The trap door beneath Black Hollow Baptist Church groaned like a dying thing as Eleanor and Sheriff Cooper pried it open. A gust of stale air rushed up, carrying the scent of wet earth, rust, and something sweetly rotten. The ladder descending into the dark was slick with condensation, its rungs warped with age. Cooper's flashlight beam trembled as it cut through the black. "This ain't on any blueprints." Eleanor's boot hit the dirt floor with a muffled thud. The chamber stretched before them, low-ceilinged and narrow, its walls lined with bones, not stacked neatly, not buried with care, strung together, rib cages linked by frayed rope, tiny finger bones woven into macabre wind chimes that stirred in the unnatural draft, skulls, all small, all young, placed in a perfect circle at the center, their empty sockets facing inward, and in the middle of that circle, a fresh disturbance in the earth. "That's not possible," Cooper whispered. Eleanor crouched, her fingers brushing the loose soil. It was damp, recently turned. Something glinted in the dirt. She pried it free, a tarnished silver locket, its hinge broken. Inside, a faded photograph of a girl in a Victorian dress. The same face from the Quick-Stop's reflection. Abigail. Then the wind chime screamed. Not the sound of bones clattering. Actual screams, high-pitched, desperate, children's voices. Cooper stumbled back, his flashlight beam jerking wildly across the walls, illuminating what they hadn't seen before. Handprints, dozens of them, pressing outward from the dirt as if something had tried to dig its way free, and at the far end of the chamber, half buried in the wall, a small shoe. Modern. The moment Eleanor's boot touched the chamber floor, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Her breath plumed in the flashlight beam as the smell hit. Not just decay, but the cloying sweetness of embalming fluid undercut with the acrid tang of spoiled milk. The walls weren't just lined with bones, they were constructed from them, femurs and radii mortared together with a clay-like substance that glistened wetly in the light. Sheriff Cooper's flashlight revealed the true horror of the wind chimes. They weren't simply strung bones. Each was a reconstructed spinal column, the vertebrae wired together with strands of hair that still held faded ribbons at the ends. The skull circle at the center had been arranged with mathematical precision, every gap between craniums measuring exactly 3.14 inches. A pie of the dead. Then Eleanor saw the teeth, embedded in the dirt walls like gruesome mosaic tiles. Thousands of milk teeth formed spiraling patterns that made her vision swim if stared at too long. Some were yellowed with age, others unnaturally white, including a cluster of modern-looking molars with orthodontic brackets still attached. "The fresh dig," Cooper whispered, pointing to the disturbed earth. His light caught something metallic protruding from the soil, a wristwatch, still ticking. Eleanor recognized the Frozen-themed band immediately. It belonged to Benji Miller. As she reached for it, the bone chimes erupted in that ear-splitting chorus of children's screams. But now, beneath the wails, Eleanor could discern words. "She's coming up through the cracks in the world." The flashlight beams strobed, as if the darkness itself was fighting them. In the erratic light, the handprints in the walls seemed to move, fingers flexing in the dirt like worms after rain. The smallest set of prints, no larger than a toddler's, left trails of brackish water as they inched downward toward the fresh excavation. Cooper suddenly grabbed Eleanor's arm. "Christ almighty," he breathed. His light trembled on the chamber's far wall where the earth had recently collapsed. Protruding from the soil was a small, pale hand, not skeletal, not rotten, perfectly preserved, the nails still pink, the skin plump as if freshly washed. A delicate silver bracelet hung from the wrist, its charm a tiny bone rattle engraved with a single word: Abigail. Then the fingers twitched. The moment Eleanor touched Abigail's bracelet, the chamber shuddered. Dirt rained from the ceiling, the bone chimes thrashed like living things, and the small, buried hand clamped around her wrist with impossible strength, cold as a winter creek, its grip burning her skin where it touched. Then the whispers began. Not from one voice, from dozens. Children's voices, layered over each other, rising from the walls, the floor, the very air. "She's here, she's here, she's here." Sheriff Cooper stumbled back, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark as the dirt wall ruptured. A tiny body spilled forward. Abigail, her sunken cheeks still clinging to the ghost of beauty, her dress the color of old blood. Her eyelids peeled open. No whites, no pupils, just blackness, deep as a mine shaft. Her lips parted. The voice that came out wasn't a child's. It was something older, something that had been hungry for a very long time. "You let them starve." Then the other walls burst. Small skeletal hands tore through the earth. Rib cages wrenched free of their clay prisons. Skulls rolled like marbles toward the center of the room, their jaws working soundlessly. And from the tunnel Benji's watch had pointed to, a giggle, high, sweet, Mia's. Cooper's flashlight caught the glint of a pink hoodie disappearing into the dark. Then the lights went out, and something inhaled in the blackness, The chamber exploded into motion the instant Abigail's fingers locked around Eleanor's wrist. The bones comprising the walls began rearranging themselves, femurs sliding like prison bars to seal the exit. Rib cages yawned open like hungry mouths, their cartilage creaking obscenely. The sheriff's revolver barked twice, silver rounds punching through a skull that simply reassembled itself mid-air, floating bone fragments clicking back into place like magnetic puzzle pieces. Abigail's black eyes reflected no light, yet Eleanor saw movement in their depths, something vast and many-legged stirring in that darkness. When the child's lips parted again, the voice came layered with centuries of hunger. You promised us wheat and milk, but gave only salt and silence. Her grip burned with supernatural cold, the flesh turning necrotic where their skin touched. Eleanor's vision swam with phantom images, a starving village winter, a circle of standing stones weeping black sap, 12 small coffins lined up in the snow, their lids nailed shut from the inside. Then the tunnel behind them exhaled. The scent of bubblegum and grave soil washed over them as Mia emerged, or what had been Mia. The girl's pink hoodie hung in tatters, revealing arms stitched with crude sutures where foreign bones protruded at unnatural angles. Her smile stretched too wide, gums black with petechial hemorrhages. You have to see, Mia sang, her voice oscillating between childish delight and something guttural. We made a playhouse down the dark. Behind her, the tunnel walls pulsed with bioluminescent fungus forming arrows pointing deeper underground. Abigail's head jerked toward the tunnel with the sound of a cervical vertebra snapping. The other reassembling skeletons froze in unison, all tilting their skulls at the same precise angle. The sheriff made his choice. His silver knife flashed, not toward the creatures, but across Eleanor's infected wrist, severing Abigail's grip. As the child thing howled, a sound that came from all the skeletons at once, Cooper shoved Eleanor toward the tunnel. Run toward the bad place, he gasped, reloading with shaking hands. It's the only way out now. Mia's giggle echoed up the tunnel as Eleanor stumbled forward. Behind her, the sheriff's final scream didn't end. It multiplied, becoming many voices crying out together in perfect harmony. The last thing Eleanor saw before the dark took her, the teeth along the path had all turned to face her, as if watching, as if waiting. The tunnel walls pulsed with that sickly bioluminescence, the fungal glow revealing the truth of Mia's playhouse. What stretched before Eleanor wasn't a cavern, it was a womb. The curved walls glistened with amniotic dampness, veined with roots that throbbed like umbilical cords. The air smelled of copper and spoiled milk, the same stench from the quick-stop freezer. And at the center, suspended in a web of hair and knotted rope, hung 12 small bodies. Not skeletons, not quite alive, changing. Their skin had gone translucent, revealing too many bones beneath, some human, some not. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering the same phrase on loop. Feed us, feed us, feed us. Then Eleanor saw her. Abigail stood beneath the web, her black eyes fixed on Eleanor. The silver rattle bracelet gleamed on her wrist. You broke the first pact, she said, her voice layered with the weight of centuries. The stones demanded 12. You gave 11. A memory that wasn't hers flashed through Eleanor's mind. A moonlit clearing, the standing stones weeping black sap. 12 small coffins, one left empty, a mother's scream, a father's lie. Abigail tilted her head. The hollow must be filled. Behind her, the hanging children twitched. Their rib cages split open like flower petals. Inside each, not organs, not blood, but things made of teeth and shadow, squirming with terrible hunger. Mia's giggle echoed from the dark. Now you see? The bioluminescent fungus pulsed like a dying star as Eleanor staggered forward, each step sinking slightly into the spongy floor. The walls weren't just damp, they were breathing, expanding and contracting with a wet, rhythmic sound that matched the hanging children's chant. Feed us, feed us, feed us. Their translucent skin revealed the horror beneath. Rib cages had unfurled like grotesque petals, each cavity filled with squirming darkness that took shapes too fleeting to comprehend. Many-legged things, coiled serpents, screaming mouths that melted and reformed. Abigail stepped forward, her bare feet leaving no prints in the organic mush. The silver rattle on her wrist chimed softly, though no wind stirred the thick air. 11 went into the dark, she intoned, black sap leaking from the corners of her eyes. 11 mouths that screamed for the 12th. The vision hit Eleanor like a physical blow. A winter night in 1693. Reverend Whitlock dragging a writhing sack toward the standing stones. Inside, little Thomas Whitlock, his own son, kicking and sobbing. The other 11 children already bound to the monoliths with ropes soaked in their mother's milk. The moment the Reverend's knife touched his boy's throat, he faltered. 1 slash, too shallow. The child escaped into the woods, his blood trail vanishing at the creek. The other parents never knew. The ritual was completed with a pig's heart in his place. The memory dissolved as Abigail's cold fingers touched Eleanor's cheek. The contact burned like dry ice. The hollow knows, she whispered. It always knew. Above them, the hanging children spasmed violently. Their skin split along old suture lines. Then the walls shrieked, not in anger, in recognition. The fungal light surged, illuminating a section of wall that wasn't organic at all, an ancient stone slab covered in carvings. The central figure made Eleanor's blood freeze, a mother holding 12 children, 11 in her arms, 1 in her belly. Abigail's black eyes overflowed with viscous tears. She waits beneath the stones, the first mother, the always hungry. From the tunnel behind them came a new sound, the wet, rhythmic slap of something massive dragging itself upward. Mia clapped her hands with ghoulish delight. She's waking up! The cavern trembled as the thing beneath the stones woke fully. The walls split like overripe fruit, weeping black sap that burned where it touched. The hanging children's chanting rose to a shriek. She comes, she comes, she comes! Abigail seized Eleanor's hand, her touch like frostbite. The hollow must be filled, she repeated, her voice no longer her own. You carry her blood. You are the 12th. A memory unspooled in Eleanor's mind. A family Bible hidden in an attic. A lineage traced in shaky ink. Her own grandmother's maiden name, Whitlock. She understood then. The ritual demanded blood. Her blood. The first mother's voice shook the cavern, a sound like a landslide of broken bones. Finish what he began. Mia giggled, her too wide smile splitting further. Dinner time. The hanging children's rib cages yawned wider, the shadows inside reaching. The cavern convulsed as the first mother's bulk shifted beneath the stones. The hanging children's skin split like overripe fruit, their rib cages blossoming into grotesque flower shapes, each cavity revealing a pulsing black umbilical cord connecting them to the breathing walls. The stench of placental decay choked the air. Abigail's fingers dug into Eleanor's wrist, her bone-rattle bracelet chiming a discordant lullaby. Whitlock blood calls to Whitlock blood, she hissed, black sap tears carving paths down her shriveled cheeks. Your great-great-great-granddaddy's knife still waits in the dark. A new vision assaulted Eleanor's senses. Reverend Whitlock's trembling hands burying the ritual blade beneath the church cornerstone. The same blade that failed to spill his son's blood. The same blade that now glints in the cavern's fungal light, protruding from the wall like an infected splinter. The first mother's voice came in seismic waves, cracking the stone slab's carvings. Bring the knife, cut the cord, feed the hollow. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.